I had recorded this one, but there was a little glitch, so I'm redoing it. And we're going to get to talk about how compassion beyond reason is straightforward for those of us in the Enlightenment soul age group, the 5D mystic, either who has come from a love cycle or who has come out of completely their heartbreak, gut wrench, torn apart, shame, defectiveness cycle. And in either end of the spectrum, what we have is a human being. And with the updated good somatic sensorimotor and trauma expert information, you would note, and anybody who doesn't know, and maybe you're not a regular listener of the IHP episodes, you would note, because I've done a couple of years with my lovely trauma experts and I'm still learning more, and the somatic experts. So our embodied brain, it's the brain with our nervous system, actually works a specific way since the moment we begin infancy. And actually, from what I've gathered, the last trimester, there are aspects that also take effect. And there's other things too, but to keep it simple, our nervous system, it's an autonomous nervous system. And you would note that we have sympathetic and parasympathetic. And sympathetic is when you're in hyper-aroused state, fight, flight. Parasympathetic has two branches. And one is dorsal vagal shutdown, which is like a dead battery of a car. And that's when, if you've ever noticed, sometimes people around you, they're no energy. They're there, they're listening. In fact, you might try and call their attention because you think they're not there, but they are. I've had plenty of people that we get to chit-chat about stuff like that. And so they are quite intrigued when I share with them exercises to activate their nervous system to get into energy. Because once you have a menu of how your nervous system works, and so dorsal vagal again is no energy, so you want to re-energize. While if it's sympathetic and therefore you're in your fight-flight, you want to actually release, you want to discharge energy, you want to find a way to get healthy, rid of frustration or anger. There's ways that one can work to get that discharge. So it's funny because most people don't relate to themselves as energy, but I am a Reiki practitioner, and so I have a lot of relationship plus 5D mystics. We have relationship with this lovely field of consciousness, which can also be called Akash. I do love that word from Sadhguru, spirituality process, and we'll get into that one too, as we always do. I have his Zen story for us, and it's going to be a good way to talk about how, one, evil does not exist. This pure evil, really what it is a pure defectiveness, shame, and heartbreak, and this very specific feeling that I've had described to me by more than just one psychoeducator and trauma expert, the ones that are looking into how to help humanity to learn how to approach their well-being. So mind experts too, neuroscientists, the ones who don't discard information because they don't believe in it, but those who are open to information and share the empirical data, they share how the colleagues are in favor, others are against it, and so they're open in a way that is very equanimous. In fact, that's where you're going to find grown-ups and 5D educators and just 5D people, which are oneness consciousness people, unconditionally loving with flaws and imperfections, and we have integration of the mind, so we use left and right mode, and there's all hands on deck, and our default mode network is down-regulated because it's not scanning, because we are still engaged in life from an insecure body. No, our body is a safe haven and safe base. We are our own safe haven and safe base, and this is from my lovely Polly Secure book. So safe haven is when you accept and love each other for who you are, you help each other feel safe. And then safe base is when you get excited for each other's desires, excitements, other partners that people have. For the polyamory community, we are okay with sharing love since it's an infinite of parasympathetic nervous system with our ventral vagal nervous system. So that's the other branch of the parasympathetic, and that's actually our mammalian autonomous nervous system part. So this is according to the way the Buddhist psychologists explain it. So they talk about ventral vagal nervous system as our mammalian branch, and it's easier for you to consciously activate it and or to work with it, and it's connected to the neocortex. And so this is where, when you're engaged socially, so if you and I are chit-chatting, even if you're telling me you completely disagree with me, or let's say you're angry and you're frustrated and you're in yellow or red. So yellow is fight flight, and that's that, again, hyper, but it's energy, but it's going to be you getting frustrated. Your tone's going to change. You're going to get all into it depending on how good I am if I'm in green. And so the functional adults who are actually inclined, a spirituality process person is a 5D mystic or a 5D person, a functional adult person. So they have integration of the mind, which means they actually are not taken over by their brainstem or their limbic system firing or something like that. There's a variety of ways. Actually, you know what? Since I have my book here, she says it very well, because I have different terminologies that I learn, and they all give me different tidbits to help people who want to learn how to work with themselves. So here it is. When we feel threatened, our primitive reptilian brain and our emotional mammalian brain systems fire up to either fight and defend ourselves, flee and quickly escape, freeze and play dead, or appease and submit. This is where she also shares something that others have shared before. Our brains can't distinguish between a physical threat to our life and an emotional or mental threat to our ego, identity, or worldview, except for if you're a 5D person, then you can. So the love cycle people, we don't do this fight-flight when we're engaging with individuals, which is also why we don't believe in evil. And when we grow up, we find out, yeah, it doesn't exist. So anyone who's interested, Polly Secure, Jessica Fern. It's a really good book. Even if you're not polyamorous, it's a good book because it talks to you about the attachment categories or styles. She uses attachment styles, but there's a way she helps you to understand how to become your whole person. And so here's where that oneness consciousness, and it's very basic. So in the meantime, for anybody who wants more information, Mindsight Institute is great with Daniel Siegel, and you get to learn about this integration of the mind, as I was saying. And on that note, the ventral vagal and that mammalian heritage of ours, we like to hug each other for a very specific reason. It activates our actual social engagement system. Obviously, that's if you like hugs. Some people, they don't like hugs, and that's unfortunate, but there are reasons for that. So the other part of being a spirituality process, which equals aka functional adult, forgiving, nuance, learns new skills, integration of the mind, is the restorative embodied self. So yoga, by the way, is a great portfolio of ventral vagal toning exercises. And when you sit in silence, what you're getting to do with mindfulness, my words are all over the place today, are you get to use your neocortex, or engage your thinking brain. The more you practice the inner growth mindset versus a inner critic or outer critic, which are shame cycles, and then denying through compulsive activity, drugs, food, alcohol. Then there's also sex, and compulsive is very specific. So people would know if they're compulsive or not if they're aware of their nervous system, and if they're aware of the difference between being in a body that is at ease or not. And so here's where some people don't actually know that until they begin to understand how that nervous system works. And this is where I find a lot of mystics in the 4D plane are not interested. They talk about karmics, they even use the word in an erroneous way, if you will, but there's belief systems and there's stories and there's reasons for it. And so even for me, when I began having clairs, the 4D community has given me a lot of information, and it still does. Metaphysics, esotericism, all of the astrology, anyone who is focused on solely the the arts of clairs, I learn a lot from them because they're specialized in the topic. But when you bring in spirituality, so Akash, Krishna Lila, Shiva, Kali, you bring in what you get to learn, or I learned from the inner engineering course, I get to equate the human stuff too, because what I learn about responding or karma from Sadhguru when he's talking about likes and dislikes in the last module of his inner engineering course. And he says how if you wake up and you have to have coffee, he says, can't not have coffee, then that's you creating karma with coffee. And here's compulsiveness. So compulsiveness, and if you look up what self-soothing is, and if you look up when a person has insecure attachment, or if they have, non-secure attachment categories are avoidant and ambivalent. Insecure is the style researchers, so they use insecure styles and they integrate dismissive, preoccupied, and fearful avoidant, or avoidant fearful. And so for them, preoccupied is equal to the ambivalent category, dismissive is equal to the avoidant category, and fearful avoidant would be instead disorganized category. Disorganized attachment category also has a secondary category, which would be secure, avoidant, or ambivalent. So these are two different schools of attachment researchers, and they say data, they share with us data, but they have different focuses. However, if you look into both of them, what you end up understanding is that attachment ruptures or attachment wounds and trauma carry on in the life of a person. So I'm just going to use the word insecure attachment. And if someone has an insecure attachment, they will have a habit of deflecting, of disconnecting, and also of avoiding their emotions because they didn't learn how to be their own safe haven. So accepting yourself with unconditional love and neutrality from within, because you don't have a defectiveness, shame, heartbreak, gut wrench, torn apart feeling, okay, which instead insecure will develop a shame that gets masked in one way, shape, or form, unworthiness, and a story. And these compulsive activities of deflection, avoidance, and distraction, which equals sex, food, drugs, alcohol, playing video games, doing things you don't like, and not noticing your energy levels, this is where people call life crappy, but they don't know about how their actual body and mind can work. So their somatic narrative, they have no idea of somatics, and when they hear emotions, because they're not all educators who are teaching people when it comes to personal development, stuff like this, they're teaching them either only one thing or another thing. So everybody knows about the 2-year-old, but nobody really understands the part that we all have the 2-year-old. My 2-year-old still comes up with my mother, for example, and my twin. But luckily for me, with all other people, I learned how to use my grown-up tone, and I'm very happy about that. The functional adult, in fact, is forgiving and nuanced because we learn how to use our left and right together. And so when people are creating conditions, which are only adaptive children emotionally, so people who are using left, their right is on whatever autopilot they've left it on, from since infancy, with the shame being then hidden by guilt or blame or fault or anger. So even here, revenge. So when people have revenge or spite or envy, these are all normal emotions, but they are emotions that a person can move out of if they allow themselves to work with their thinking and not create conditions that are egoic from a space that is in a charge. So first you'd notice, wait, I'm really pissed right now. And so I should wait till I calm down and then think something through. And then also recognize I'm a person, they're a person. This is, there's a big world out there. I'm not the only person in town. So it's natural for me to, have to share different types of thoughts. The part about not distinguishing the difference between emotional and mental attack, quote unquote, versus physical attack for the mind is important for me to share once again. So evil doesn't exist. It's actually a lot of individuals that don't get to handle their emotional self, but they also have other things that have taken place in their life. And on that note, before we run out of time, Michael Stone, if I left anything pending, reach out, guys or gals or theys. I'm happy to answer. What is evil? So this is from Big Think, Michael Stone. He begins with, is it really legitimate for ordinary folk to use that word? And I love that he says this because, the reality is no. Not only does it not exist, but furthermore, it's a story. So if you're only doing religious institution, okay, there. If it's philosophy, okay. So he says, for thousands of years, it belonged to the sphere of religion and philosophy. But he says, I noticed that people use it all over the place. Ordinary life people, journalists, prosecutors, judges. Yeah, I've heard of it a lot. When I came to my 18-ish years of age, I told God, at the time I would use the word God, today I use consciousness, energy, this field of life. But I said, hey, there's no evil, my lovely regular listeners know the story, and it's because I read a bunch of psychology books as somebody who already had began my journey to support people in life in general, humanly speaking, but also that was my intention all along, to be doing stuff that can help people to live their best life. Tapping into your infinite higher human consciousness potential experience is really fun, and I can share with you how to do that from an enlightenment soul age perspective and a love cycle. So I get the shame because I'm learning about it, but I come from love, and with love, compassion mirror. Here's where, remember the story from Sadhguru, the Zen master. We'll have a little bit of time for that one if you don't remember it. So this Michael Stone, he has the scale of evil he created, and he uses 1 to 22. He says 1 to 9 is ordinary people. They're impulsive murderers. They're usually not, doing stuff that has anything to do with psychopathic traits or complete psychopathic reactivity, and they just find themselves in an awful situation. Then it's 9 to 16, where there's a number of psychopathic traits: grandiosity, superficial charm, goodness and manipulativeness, flying or lying, and lack of remorse and callousness. 16 to 22, we got serial killers who are psychopathic, and they actually are the ones that prolong torture. So here's how he does his scale of evil, but this is the part where that's not an evil person. It's a person who needs a good somatic, sensory motor, and trauma expert to help them work with their brain's structure. Because when you look into the psychopath's brain structure, their amygdala picks up on things differently, feelings, and if you see someone in distress and I think it's the orbital cortex, I forget where it is, but that's shut off or it doesn't engage, and that's our break. So that's what lets us know this is not a good thing. And the cingulate too isn't as loud, so they have an actual physiological structure, which doesn't equate this word that was used, evil, for books and philosophy, and before we had technology that can actually see inside what happens here and here. And on that note, when you hear the Zen master story from Sadhguru, where he ends with the disciples who ask or say basically to the guru, they say, you have to kick out the compulsive thief, otherwise we're going to leave. And he says, no, you need to forgive the compulsive thief. And this is where the story shares punishment only makes a person more rock solid, while compassion, forgiveness, will shatter. Now, here's where, when you understand how shame dissolves, this loneliness, heart feeling, heartbreak, gut wrench, the way the trauma experts explain it, it's when a person gets seen and accepted, they get a safe haven. Someone who says, I unconditionally love you with your imperfections and your flaws, you're not defective. But because this feeling is so torturous and just of the 1-year-old, it's very scary and destabilizing for a person who has no idea what it means to be a human, because they don't have the inclination to be interested in psychoeducation. So they may know about yoga, but they don't know about this defectiveness here and what arises, and that if you don't know it's unresolved trauma, when it arises, it confuses you and you feel really, really scared and upset. And then if you lead a life that has been compulsive and you do things in biological rudeness, the yellow, so you yell at people, or even the red, this free zone, and you are in the habit of adding behaviors like manipulation, gaslighting, you already feel defective. There's your Teflon shame. This is Russell Coates. And so you've done something, you do more, and then you're like, I am not a good person. Well, that's not the case. You're a person who needs a good somatic, sensory motor trauma therapist. So the conditions are of the adaptive children, the ones who don't learn how to grow up. Thank you, Terry Real, for letting me in on adaptive children. They want to prove they're right. They will try to control another person and the situation. They will make it all about themselves. Then, if that doesn't work, they will decide to retaliate if you do anything that makes them upset. And they will think that they have a justification. And then they will withdraw, like giving silent treatment or just silence. and not doing anything. Unfortunately, those same people have loop thinking. So they sit in a biochemistry of fear with a hero-villain story and or other stories, and they just sit in their temporal junction, and that's very sad. So here's compulsiveness for you with a shame cycle, inner critic, outer critic, denying through sex, drugs, alcohol, food, and whatever other mechanisms of distraction or avoidance, or just disengaging from exploring. You haven't resolved trauma. You haven't made sense of the very challenging situation to create a secure attachment within you. But when met by people who unconditionally love you and share a compassionate mirror, safe haven, and tell you how it is straight up, you're giving and getting the opportunity. Now, here's the part. Safe base also, of course, supporting passions. And then consistency is key, but the person needs to want to grow out of it, and the person needs to believe that there isn't evil and that they're not evil, and that they want to move into the self that they can be with the personality that they have, and that they're not defective, unworthy, too much, too little, shitty, their biggest mistake. And so we need more people who are compassionate beyond a reason, which is where the 5D mystics in the Enlightenment Soul Age group are at. And in fact, the spirituality process, this Zen master that tells his disciples, you can go away, I'm forgiving the compulsive thief. As Sadhguru ends the story, he shares with us how obviously these are not disciples. They just want to carry their weight. They're not there for transformation. When people don't want to become their functional adults, forgiving and nuanced, integrate their mind, learn how to navigate left and right, and so learn to hold your emotions, use them, speak them. They just choose to do like the movies because they use the word everyone's evil, everyone lies, everyone heartbreaks, all these cliche stereotypes. Well, there's your choice. There's your disciples who aren't actually disciples, or there's people who are not trying to be the actual version of ourselves that every person can be: a restorative embodied self, an integrated mind, a compassionate human being for self and others, unconditionally loving, with our lovely flaws and imperfections. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day.